Good morning and welcome to this video podcast in which we'll be discussing what are likely to be the key talking points for the electric power sector in Latin America and the Caribbean in 2024. My name is Michael Place. I'm joined by João Montenegro in Brazil, David Casellas and Alan Brown in Chile, and Ariel Rodriguez in Mexico. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
João, let's start with you. A large transmission tender and the opening of the free or non-regulated market are expected to be the highlights of Brazil's electric power sector in 2024. Can you tell us about the upcoming tenders for transmission and also generation projects, and perhaps share your thoughts on how you see the overall investment climate in Brazil this year?
Sure, Mike. Yeah, Brazil is holding important transmission tenders, large ones. The first one in June is expected to attract almost 20 billion reais or $3.7 billion for the construction of over 6,000 kilometers of lines. Then, as usual, Brazil is also planned to hold a power transmission tender in December. These auctions are very important to bring energy from the northeast region of the country, where most of the renewable energy projects are being built nowadays, to the main consumption centers of the country in the southeast region, mostly São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and also in the south. Regarding power generation, the outlook is a little gloomy. It remains unclear if the government will carry out the so-called backup capacity tenders, which are mainly focused on hydro and thermal power to assure energy security. The two backup tenders that were originally scheduled for 23 were postponed because there's a surplus of energy in the country due to the favorable hydrologic conditions in Brazil. It's worth recalling, Mike, that hydroelectricity accounts for over half of the country's electric power matrix, and the reservoir levels of Brazil's main hydro plants remained high even during the dry period in the winter time in the southeast region mostly. Not even the traditional A-3, A-4, and A-5 auctions were held last year. Only the A-1 and A-2, which only involve brownfield projects. So no greenfield projects were contracted in the regulated environment last year. Meanwhile, the rapid growth of distributed generation, which are the small plants installed on roofs or next to the consumption points, keeps flooding Brazil with more energy. So as a result, the price of energy in the free or non-regulated power market remains on the floor at approximately 70 reais per megawatt hour, which hinders the conditions to get greenfield power generation projects off the drawing board. Adding up to this scenario is the fact that the growth outlook of power consumption in Brazil is relatively low, which also contributes for the current glut of new projects, mostly renewable energy undertakings that rushed to request connection to the power grid before the end of tax incentives in recent years. One last highlight before we close. Since January 1st of 24, all high tension electricity consumers became eligible to migrate to the free market. So there's a sort of golden rush among power traders to get these new clients who, according to Brazil's Electric Power Commercialization Chamber, CCEE, amount to around 70,000 consumer units. It's a big thing that we'll be following this year. Mike.
Thanks, João. Interesting dynamics there. There seems to be, it's either one extreme or the other, isn't it, in the region where you've got either high prices and short supply, or the situation in Brazil at the moment where there seems to be oversupply and prices are too low. So it's very difficult to get that balance, but very interesting. Thanks for that insight, João. David Casellas, there seems to be a steady stream of news about the ongoing renewable energy build out in the Caribbean and also Central America, where countries are accelerating efforts to wean themselves off fossil fuels. What can we expect on this front in that region of Latin America in 2024?
Yeah. Hi, Mike. Yeah, I think here I'd like to put the spotlight on the Caribbean's smaller islands. This year, we'll see added impetus as governments look to advance projects and initiatives to wean off their economies from fossil fuels and to also fulfill national energy plans for renewables to account for most or all of supply in the coming decades. In Jamaica, for example, the government will be accepting offers in the coming months to supply 100 megawatts from renewable energies. And we recently reported that over 40 companies had submitted expressions of interest for the 20-year power purchase agreements. And authorities are also talking about launching a second call for 168 megawatts. And also staying in Jamaica, the local power utility, JPS, has its own call underway for a 115 megawatt solar plant, 172 megawatts of battery storage, and a 12 megawatt onshore wind farm. Moving to the Bahamas, the government is accepting expressions of interest from investors to make equity investments of between $30 and $50 million in a renewable energy fund as part of plans which envision over 100 megawatts of cleaner energy to be installed in the next 5 years. And the Bahamas' energy ministry also has bidding underway to develop 25 megawatts of solar microgrid capacity. Moving further east, Renewable Barbados looks to secure financing for a 50 megawatt solar and energy storage project, and Dominica Geothermal Development aims to award the transmission component for a 10 megawatt plant. And finally, from the Caribbean, it's worth noting that SsangYong Engineering and Construction just announced it will be developing a 12 megawatt solar power plant in Haiti.
Thanks very much for that, David, for that insight on what is happening in the Caribbean region. In the Andean region, which you also cover, there is a focus on expanding grid infrastructure. What are some of the opportunities we can expect for transmission project developers this year?
Right, Mike. Here, let's highlight what's happening in Peru, where there is no let-up in actions to reinforce electricity dispatch, especially work to decentralize the grid and support the build-out of new renewable energy capacity in the north and the south of the country. This year, investment promotion agency ProInversión has set the target of awarding public-private partnerships for a combined $8 billion, of which around $900 million will be for power transmission concessions, with 4 groups of works to be offered. Special emphasis has been placed on expanding the 500 kV network with proposed links that include Chilca, Caraballo, and Paroma Colectora, as well as substations Bicentenario and Paroma. The other planned infrastructure will be to shore up the 220 kV grid. But it's worth mentioning that although there's a robust pipeline of lines and substations, there is recurring criticism among stakeholders that the process is very drawn out from promotion to startup because of permitting and other issues. And finally, it's worth noting that grid operator COES is due to release its 2025-2034 transmission plan in March.
Thanks for that update, David, on what is happening in the Caribbean region and also in the Andean region. Alan, over to you in Argentina. The newly elected President Javier Milei has promised to scale back subsidies that he blames for years of underinvestment and electricity supply problems in the country. It's part of a broader plan to deregulate the economy and reduce the role of the state while encouraging private investment and competition. What do you think will be some of the consequences of this strategy in 2024?
I think, Mike, similar to what's happening in the oil and gas sector, I think there's a lot of investors, a lot of stakeholders are kind of watching from the sidelines for now. They're in kind of wait and see mode. Malay's trying to turn around the battleship on a dime. Pretty much, he's introduced all these regulatory changes. His big omnibus bill. He's trying to do a lot, and I think because there's a lot of uncertainty, so I think investors will be watching for the sidelines from now, perhaps making plans. A big areas for opportunities is clearly transmission, especially since Malay favors like decentralized contracts. So there's a lot of space there for corporate PPAs, power purchase agreements, and the development of new renewables plants. But a lot of that hinges on transmission, and the government, obviously the cash-strapped government, it can't finance the requisite transmission lines. So there's a need for the private sector to enter to build the transmission lines to support the addition of new renewables capacities. But we're talking obviously a lot of money, and investors will want some kind of copper bottom guarantees that the investment is going to be safe, regulatory clarity. So I think this year, 2024, it's going to be a year of lawmaking, a lot of observing from the sidelines and preparing. And obviously, once the sea's steady, we could see investment starting to flow. But again, it's a kind of wait and see mode at the moment. See what's happening there.
Great, thanks for that insight, Alan, to Argentina. Ariel Rodriguez in Mexico. Ariel, we've heard a lot about the elections in Mexico this year. Obviously, they're not until the middle of the year, and the president isn't going to come into office until at least September. And I'm just wondering on that front, is there any changes that you expect in Mexico as a result of the election, or is it too soon to speak? And if there are any changes, what do you think they will be?
Hello, everyone. Well, Michael, definitely too soon to speak. However, we've noticed that in this year, the government is rushing to finish a lot of transmission projects. More precisely, there are two massive transmission projects for the north and the southern part of the country. And what experts have told us is that the time frame that the government is putting to complete these projects are very tight, and all ends up with President López Obrador ending his term this year. As you said, the government has a lot of pending projects to finish, not just these transmission ones, but there's also a portfolio of combined cycle plants for which we have no idea what the progress is. And what we're going to see a lot in this year and the remaining of 2025 is unfinished projects, but also whoever comes after López Obrador will inherit this package of unfinished projects, and also a lot of concerns regarding the capacity the country can provide for upcoming companies, and companies that are settling here in the country, as you know, us for the phenomenon of the nearshoring. Just to give you a couple of numbers, the International Chamber of Commerce has come out to said recently that we need probably 2 trillion of pesos, about $112 billion, to deploy 59,000 kilometers of transmission lanes just to keep up with the demand from the nearshoring. So it is definitely something that the private sector is very concerned. And also just wanted to mention really quick that in terms of renewables, well, we are not going to meet that goal that Mexico vowed to meet in the 2014 Paris Agreement of generating 35% of our electricity from clean sources.
Thank you very much for that, Ariel, about what is happening in Mexico and what we can expect there in 2024. Well, Colombia's renewable energy teething problems are now turning into something far more severe and systemic, with many experts believing that they are representative of deeply rooted structural problems. Since Colombia's first renewable energy auction in 2019, there have been 50 wind and solar projects announced, and not one of those projects are online. Those projects total 2.5 gigawatts of capacity. So it just gives you some idea about the challenges and the delays that are facing the Colombian power sector. According to official figures, wind and solar power still only make up less than 2% of the country's installed capacity, which is still, of course, heavily reliant on hydropower. Industry observers blame the slow progress on social unrest and environmental licensing requirements, including a need for developers to conduct exhaustive consultations with individual communities. GEB, for example, had to consult with more than 200 communities to build or to start construction work on its collector transmission line in the country's north, which is key to connecting renewable energy projects to the grid. So to this end, there's a great deal of intrigue regarding what will happen to major projects. Among those, Enel's 205 megawatt wind Pesci wind complex and EDF Renewables 145 megawatt Girardot solar complex. Both of those projects were suspended last year amid crippling delays in licensing processes and community resistance. It also remains to be seen if President Gustavo Petro will succeed in his plan to cap electricity prices, a move that experts say would further undermine confidence among energy investors. In addition to this, Colombia is facing another El Niño period, which is prompting electricity prices to soar and has raised fears of electricity shortages if the dry weather continues into the next few months. So there is great uncertainty and a general sense of unease among project developers in electric power in Colombia. With that, we'll wrap this conversation up. Thank you to João Montenegro, David Casallas, Alan Brown, and Ariel Rodriguez for joining us and sharing your thoughts about what is in store for the electric power sector in Latin America in 2024. For further insights, we invite our subscribers to take a look at our Electric Power 2024 Intelligence Series Outlook Report, which is available on our platform now. For now, thank you for joining us and goodbye.